All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and we are going to talk about something Floyd Mayweather Jr. had to say about Canelo Alvarez and his stature in boxing, who he's fighting next, and what he should do. And long and short of it for me is that Floyd Mayweather Jr. is making a very, very solid point, and there's not a lot of things that people can say about Floyd Mayweather Jr. His point, considering what this man has done in his career. But let's explain what he says, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on it in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. More interesting stuff going on in boxing. There's a WBC convention that is taking place in Mexico, so there's a lot of announcements that are coming out about the sport of boxing and what's going to be happening in the year 2022. Floyd Mayweather Jr. was there. Canelo Alvarez trainer Eddie Reynoso was there. So, you know, combination of those two camps, we got some good news. Well, got some news, I will say. Canelo Alvarez is planning to fight a guy, move up to the cruiserweight division and fight the WBC champion, Makabu. And Floyd Mayweather Jr., who was also at the press conference, had something to say about Canelo Alvarez and what he would like to see Canelo Alvarez do next. And I'm going to tell you, man, I agree with Floyd Mayweather Jr. He basically is saying, look, you know, Canelo Alvarez is an excellent fighter without a doubt, and I think that is fair. Anybody that would say that Canelo Alvarez is not an excellent fighter, I don't see that. I don't see that viewpoint because he is. He's most definitely one of the biggest names in boxing, a very valuable commodity in boxing, makes big fights, all of the above. However, he is not the only good fighter in boxing, according to Floyd Mayweather Jr. And he's like, look, there are other guys that deserve the credit too, that are just as good of fighters as Canelo Alvarez. And he says Gervonta Davis. He talks about Errol Spence. He talks about Terrence Crawford and says, look, these are guys that also deserve the credit that we're giving Canelo Alvarez. Now, he mentions, and this is where I think that it is most important. He said also guys like David Benavidez, who was a terrific fighter. Canelo Alvarez should fight David Benavidez and test himself against David Benavidez. So when Floyd Mayweather Jr. says that, I just have to say, man, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I honestly don't do a lot of talking about Floyd Mayweather Jr. I don't do a lot of criticism about him. Haven't been, you know, a tremendously big supporter of him over the last couple of years. I had during an early part of his career and actually during his actual boxing career. But, you know, since then he's, you know, was doing all this stuff out, you know, with fighting guys like Logan Paul and stuff like that. I just wasn't that big on it. But I do appreciate what he's saying about Canelo, and I think that that is true. There is a big love affair going on with Canelo Alvarez right now because Canelo Alvarez is a big revenue producer. And I'm seeing a lot of people that are supporting this Makabu fight, which I, for the life of me, as a boxing fan, as somebody that actually has to pay for the fights, really do not see the benefit in, because I know that there are guys down there in those divisions that he came through that would be good fights for Canelo Alvarez, that could make excellent, exciting fights for boxing fans. And I would love to see those fights, man, because what Canelo Alvarez is doing right now, I mean, I just don't think that there's any other way that you can say it, man. He is skipping and jumping around, and he is fighting guys that are not the best competition for him. If you look at what he did what he's done since the Gennady Golovkin fight, which, by the way, the first fight was back in 2017, right? So over the last 4 years, what has Canelo Alvarez been doing over the last 4 years when you're talking about the actual people that he's fighting? I'm not talking about, you know, how many belts he's won and what belt he's got off of what guy, because we all know, if you're a true and really pay attention to boxing, you know that there is way too many belts out there. There are a whole bunch of people that are calling themselves champions, and 4 and 5 of them in a division at a time. And if you are just picking one guy, 1 out of 5 guys in any particular weight division, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're fighting the best fighters out there. Now, Canelo Alvarez, I can tell you, and I've said this multiple times, I am not a Canelo. I don't hate on Canelo just for the sake of hating on Canelo and saying things bad about Canelo. I do not have a problem with Canelo Alvarez making as much money as Canelo Alvarez wants. I don't have a problem with people who think he's the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, with the exception, the only reason I don't have him there is because he tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs. And I didn't make him do that. It's just what happened, and it's just part of my just thought process is like, man, now that you tested positive, I can't trust that you're clean. But even if other people think that he's clean and want to brush that off, that's their prerogative. And if you tell me, man, Canelo Alvarez is a better fighter than everybody at 160 or everybody at 168 and everybody at 175, and you say he is the best fighter in those weight divisions, I say, okay, I can agree with that. I do believe that he would beat all of these guys. However, the operative word in that is believe he would beat these guys. Because when I'm looking at who he's actually fighting, he's not fighting the guys that I think are the best besides him. At 106, if you take away after the Triple G fight, the best fighters at 160 when he was there were Jamal Charlo and Demetrius Andrade. He did not fight them. At 160 pounds, where he holds all 4 of those belts. The best fighter, and I think it's a consensus that the best fighter, not named Canelo Alvarez, is David Benavidez. It wasn't Callum Smith. It wasn't Billy Joe Saunders. It wasn't Caleb Plant. It's not any of those guys. The best guy there is David Benavidez. So when he goes to the weight division and you say, okay, he's the best guy in the weight division, but he never actually fought the second best guy at the weight division. Or when he goes to 175 and he fights Sergey Kovalev, a Sergey Kovalev that we know the book was already out on. Andre Ward, years before that, said exactly how you beat Sergey Kovalev, and he said it before he knocked out Sergey Kovalev. He said, look, Sergey Kovalev is got a tremendous punch. He's a good boxer, but he cannot take shots to the body. If you are able to land shots to the body on him for a few rounds, you're going to stop him. And that's exactly what he did after he said it. And that's exactly the blueprint that Canelo Alvarez took to fight him, because he already knew Sergey Kovalev was vulnerable like that. And who were the best guys at 175? It is either Beterbiev, Bivol. Those guys were the more highly ranked and highly respected 175s when Canelo Alvarez was there. So if you're looking at it from the viewpoint of fans seeing the best fights possible, and that's what we are. I mean, I do not work for Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez does not pay my bills. I do not have any incentive in saying, let me support a fight because of how big it is for Canelo Alvarez, or concerned about these records that he says that he's going for his history, where I'm like, hold on, man, you go to be a 5-division champion by fighting Makabu. But dude, there are a bunch of guys that have won championships in 5 divisions at this point. As a matter of fact, Manny Pacquiao, I do believe, has him. He gets credit for having him in 8. I would say 7, but if you want to say 8, say 8. I personally say that 140-pound title for the IBO shouldn't count. And some people also say that the 152 catch weight for Margarito shouldn't count. But hey, if they fought for a catch weight at 154, give them credit for it. However, that's either 7 or 8. So Canelo Alvarez, by going up to cruiserweight and fighting the 5th or 6th best guy in the division and getting another title, that doesn't do anything for me as a fan. Actually being able to see him prove whether or not he can beat Jamal Charlo, beat Demetrius Andrade, or beat these other guys does give me something. And before you guys come off and say this, which is what you guys some people are constantly saying, well, why don't they all fight each other? That's besides the point. He's definitely not going to fight all those guys at one time, and those guys do need to fight each other. And at this point, obviously, they're not going to have any choice but to fight each other if these guys want to grow a name for themselves. But that does not absolve Canelo Alvarez from having to fight the best competition, because that's what boxing is supposed to be. That's what being a champion is supposed to be. Being a champion is that you beat the best guys in your division, not that you beat some guy with a title and you left the other guys out hanging in the wind and just claim that you're better than them. And if you look at Floyd Mayweather Jr. and you look at what Floyd Mayweather Jr. did through large parts of his career, he did that. At 147, the man that everybody said that Floyd Mayweather should fight was Manny Pacquiao, and he fought Manny Pacquiao, who was the best guy at 147 pounds. The best guy that was supposed to be at 154 pounds at the time that he dipped up there real quick was Canelo Alvarez, and he fought him. At 135 pounds, he fought a bunch of guys. I'm not sure who was considered the best at 135 at the time, but Ricky Hatton was a guy that I think it might even been Ricky Hatton. Actually, Ricky Hatton was 140. But at 140, he beat Ricky Hatton, the guy that everybody said was the best and was going to beat him. Same at 130, definitely at 130 pounds. He did that and 135 with Castillo and Corrales. So, even if you want to say, that this is, Floyd is just hating, Floyd ain't lying. Floyd did fight the best guys in the divisions that he fought, even if he didn't fight all of the top guys, but all of the top 3 or 4 guys, but the actual top guy in those divisions, he fought. And Floyd Mayweather should, and that was with everybody knowing Floyd was the best fighter. So fighting the guy closest to him, and Canelo Alvarez is just not doing that. And I'm glad Floyd says something about it, because David Benavidez should get that fight. That's my take on the matter. Please let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.